All right, today we are diving into a classic story by Honore De Balzac that, even though it's 2 centuries old, feels surprisingly modern. It's a powerful story about love, class, and that painful, painful gap between what we dream of in a partner and the reality of who they actually are. But at its core, the story asks this really fascinating question. What happens when a work of art falls in love with its artist? And maybe more tragically, what happens when that artist realizes his living, breathing masterpiece can't love him back in a way he can even understand?
Okay, so let's set the scene. Picture this. We're in early 19th century Paris, and this is a city of huge contrasts, where the old-school world of commerce is rubbing up against the brand-new, vibrant world of art. And right at the center of our story is this house. Balzac describes it as this old, almost medieval relic. And its most famous feature is its sign, a cat playing a game of rackets. It's this quirky, memorable image that perfectly captures a world totally steeped in tradition, a world that's kind of sealed off from the passions of modern life.
So, let's meet our two main characters. On one side, you've got Théodore de Sommervieux. He's this brilliant, super passionate young painter. His world is all about high society, big ideas, and even bigger emotions. And then, on the other side, there's Augustine Guillaume. She's the beautiful, deeply religious daughter of the merchant who owns that very shop. Her world couldn't be more different. It's all about strict routines, duty, and business. I mean, they're basically from two different planets.
The whole story really kicks off one night when Theodore just happens to look into the shop window. And what he sees, it's not just a family having dinner. To him, it looks like a living painting, like a Dutch masterpiece, all lit by a single lamp. And right there, at the center of it all, is Augustine. For an artist like Theodore, she isn't just a pretty girl. No, she's a perfect, pure figure from another time, a living, breathing work of art. And just like that, he becomes completely obsessed.
So how does this artist's obsession turn into an actual romance? A romance that has to try and bridge this massive, massive gap between their worlds? Well, let's get into it.
You see, their courtship is anything but ordinary. Theodore doesn't write her love letters or send flowers. No, he paints her. He secretly creates these two incredible masterpieces. One is a portrait of Augustine herself, and the other is a painting of the inside of her family's shop. These paintings become the talk of the town at the big Paris Salon exhibition. And when Augustine is finally taken to see them, she sees herself on the wall, and suddenly it all clicks. She is the secret muse for this famous artist. Art, literally, becomes the bridge between them. But, falling in love is one thing. Winning over her family, that's a whole other ballgame. Her father, Monsieur Guillaume, is a very practical, old-school merchant. He thinks artists are just irresponsible, spendthrifts who can't be trusted with money. So what finally wins him over? It's not love. It's a checklist. Theodore has a noble title, a really good income, he's famous enough to be honored by the emperor, and, this is crucial, the dad insists on a marriage contract that keeps his daughter's money completely separate. It's basically a business deal for him.
And this is where the story gets really juicy. Because what happens after the happily ever after? The wedding happens, of course, but that initial fire of passion very quickly runs smack into the cold, hard wall of just how different they really are.
I mean, their core problem is laid out right here. For Theodore, money is round that it may roll. It's a tool to have experiences. But for Augustine, who was raised by her thrifty father, money is flat, to be piled. It's all about security. Theodore lives for these big, grand passions. Augustine lives for quiet duty and order. They're speaking fundamentally different languages about the entire meaning of life.
And this communication gap is it's heartbreaking. You have Theodore just bursting with pride, showing Augustine his latest masterpiece, something he's poured his entire soul into. And her response is always this loving but very simple, "Oh, how pretty." Now to her, that's the biggest compliment she can give. But to him, it feels like a complete dismissal of his genius. It feels like she can't see what he sees or feel what he feels. And Theodore just can't accept this. As Balzac puts it, he doesn't think she's dumb. He convinces himself that her soul is just asleep. So he starts this misguided project to educate her, to mold his living masterpiece into the kind of intellectual, artistic partner he wants. But see, he's not trying to understand her, he's trying to change her. And this, right here, is where the real tragedy begins. This total failure to translate their love into a language they can both understand, it starts to poison everything.
This timeline really shows you just how quickly it all falls apart. Year 1, total bliss, completely wrapped up in each other. But by year 2, as Theodore gets back to his work and his fancy friends, the cracks start to show. By year 3, he's looking for companionship with other women, leaving Augustine totally alone and heartbroken. And by year 4, it's just tragedy. It's not a slow burn, it's a fast, painful crash.
Now, what's so brilliant here is the contrast Balzac draws between Augustine and her older sister, Virginia. Remember, Augustine married for this huge, passionate love and entered high society. Virginia, she made a sensible, practical marriage to her father's top employee and just kept living her quiet life above the shop. And the outcome? Augustine dies of sorrow at just 27, while Virginia goes on to live a perfectly content, stable life. Balzac is making a really sharp point about the dangers of flying too close to the sun.
You know, maybe the most heartbreaking part of the whole story is that Augustine tries. She really does. She throws herself into reading books and learning about music and art, desperate to become the woman she thinks her husband wants. But it's too late. Her efforts just feel forced, you know? They don't have that natural spark. And instead of bringing them closer, it just makes that huge gulf between them seem even wider.
So what is Balzac's big lesson here? Because this story is way more than just one failed marriage. It's a powerful look at the society he was living in.
Ultimately, what Balzac is giving us is a social diagnosis. He's making the argument that love and passion alone are just not enough to break down the barriers of class, education, and upbringing. And that's why this story still hits so hard today. It makes you think about the invisible walls that still exist in our relationships, whether they're built out of money or education or just seeing the world in a completely different way.
Which leads us to the big question. Was their tragedy just inevitable? Could they have made it work if they had just tried harder to understand each other's worlds instead of trying to change each other? Or were the social forces just too strong for any one couple to overcome?
Balzac leaves us with this powerful, unforgettable metaphor. Augustine, she was that humble flower, beautiful and perfect in her own world, that quiet little valley of her father's shop. But when she was transplanted to the dazzling, storming heights of Theodore's world, she just couldn't survive. It's a tragic, beautiful reminder that the very things that shape us can also define the places where we can and cannot thrive.